So with that, we're on to our headliner. Tonight is Lou Begnel as our headliner. Lou works in supply chain management, supporting oncology or cancer drug development for Eli Lilly and Company. Outside of his day job, Lou is a district director for Toastmasters of Indiana and Northwest Kentucky. He has been married to his wife, Iona, for 15 years and has two daughters, Emma and Nora. Emma is 5 and Nora is 6. Let's all help welcome Lou to the Spark stage.
Thanks, Chris. The title of my talk is Being a Recovering Perfectionist. So I will have a little bit of a different angle on what perfectionist means to me. When you think of the number 300, what comes to your mind? All right. Yeah. So if you're not from Sparta, it would indicate that it's a perfect game in bowling. When you bowl 12 strikes, you score 300. That's a perfect game in bowling. I have never bowled a perfect game. But there was one time in college that I took a 1-credit-hour course in bowling. I went to a liberal arts school. That's why they offered bowling. And the very first day, went out and bowled, gave it 110%, and I bowled 110. After about 8 weeks of this course, I upped my average into the 140s. I noticed, though, there was a contrast between those of my peers, my classmates. I was one of the top scores for the very first week, but one of the lower scores at the last week. And what my classmates knew that I didn't was that a large percentage of the grade was based on improvement from the first day. And that's why there was a lot of gutter balls. And so I got a B for that class, which was the 1 credit hour that kept me from having a perfect 4.0 GPA in college. Now, to understand why that bothers me so much is that if I take you back to my adolescent years, I had 6 years in a row where I had perfect straight A's and perfect attendance. I was one of those kids that the classmates loved. I wasn't that smart, mind you. I just studied real hard. I had a really good memory, lots of discipline. I never considered myself talented or gifted, certainly not in bowling or anything that required coordination or physical prowess. But when it came to grades, I could do it. Now, my grades took me all the way to graduate school. I was enrolled in a doctoral program where I was earning a PhD. After my second semester, I learned that my fellowship was not going to be renewed. And for me, that was the end of the road. As a perfectionist, someone who had to get it right all of the time, that was the final end. I knew that I wasn't continuing on after that. But what got me started, and what you might consider every perfectionist has a beginning. It was some event that happened in their life. You might call it an origin story. And for Spider-Man, for example, is being bit by a spider. That gave him his powers. But it was what he decided to do with his powers that made him a superhero. For me, I had a gift. I could do well in school. But for me, my origin story was a little bit different. It was when my mother passed away. I was 11 years old. And the one thing that it taught me, besides the impermanence of life, is that the only thing that really exists after you're gone is the effect that you had on others. And for me, what I wanted to do was I wanted to be the person who found the cure for cancer. That's what drove me. That was my why. That was my goal. And anything short of that was a failure. When you think of perfection or perfectionism, there are two ways that you can think about it. One is that your goal, if you make that goal or don't, it's a failure if you view that as something that impacts your worth. Perfectionism, to me, was, and Brene Brown is one of the great academic researchers who talks about this, is kind of like a 20-ton shield. You have it for protection, but it actually is also hiding you from being exposed. And for me, that failure, it was something that I was essentially living or dying with. For my own experience within being a perfectionist, trying to find this cure for cancer, to me it was more of almost like trying to exact revenge. The same year that my mother passed, there was a movie that came out, and the movie was The Princess Bride. How many of you have seen that? Yes? Okay. A lot of references from the 80s and 90s. If you're younger than 40, you may not get some of these. But in The Princess Bride, the character of Inigo Montoya had to exact revenge because his father was killed, and he had to find the six-fingered man who had killed his father. So what you may not be able to see up there is the line in his movie was, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die," which is great for networking because it has a polite greeting, his own name, relevant personal link, and managing the expectations. When they asked the actor who played Inigo Montoya, his name's Mandy Patinkin, when they asked him what his favorite line of the movie was, now granted, this was an iconic line. It was the one that he is known for. It probably launched his career and gave him a lot more opportunities, but the one that he liked was after he had killed the six-finger man, exacted his revenge. They asked, "So what's next?" And he said, "Well, I've been in the revenge business for so long, now that it's over, I don't know what I'm going to do." So for me, ending my academic career as a researcher was devastating. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I tried to do the things that would give me a little bit of discomfort. So I said there'd be a lot of 80s and now a 90s reference. What perfectionism was like for me was kind of like the bus from Speed. Are any of you familiar with? So there's a bomb on the bus, and it was activated whenever the bus gets above 50 miles an hour, and it was detonated if the bus had then dropped below 50 miles an hour. Now imagine that you're the driver of this bus, you have passengers. Perfectionism is kind of like juggling also while driving. And behind every perfectionist, when they're focusing on one thing in their life, they're probably neglecting something else. And at some point down the road, there's going to be a crash. It may not be a bus explosion per se, but something that happens. You've heard of maybe a world-class athlete who had a difficult personal relationship. Maybe it was an event that happens, a career that gets ended, and that person just doesn't know what to do. So how I was able to make peace with perfection or perfectionism and how I was able to recover is to think of perfectionism more as an optimalist. And what I mean by that is by learning information, growing as part of that, not tying failure to my self-worth. So I started doing public speaking, which is why I'm here today. And I've been in Toastmasters for 15 years, and just getting up in front of a room in an imperfect way is, to me, just about as perfect as it can get, because now I get to share my story, my life, with all of you. So, thank you.
Don't delay. Get your ticket for the next Sparks event today.